It was my only real attempt at suicide. I had flirted with the idea with varying levels of commitment. I had even threatened it in desperate attempts to get anyone to step in and rescue me, or to convince the staff to end their mistreatment, even if only to buy myself a temporary reprieve. It would work, and I would be left to my own devices for a few days, but ultimately it only served to add more fodder to my increasingly unflattering case files. This was my only serious effort. No drama, no warning, no last-minute cry for help. I simply woke up and started preparing for it like a normal everyday event. I had been sent to the borough of Brent a week after leaving my second consignment of psyche debris shattered on the front steps of Passage House. My caseworker had taken the rare step of reverting to Jekyll form and affably told me she had taken my request to be housed north of London seriously and had gone to great lengths to find a place. It hadn't been easy, and she had had to work on her own time to arrange it. She was friendly and pleasant in demeanor, but Hyde still dwelt in her eyes when she reminded me I had agreed to accept it. I made the journey, and it proved the worst of all the viewings I had attended, not only for myself, but with friends I had accompanied on their prospective housing assignments. The front yard was rubble, littered with beer cans, drug paraphernalia, and smashed bottles. The wheelie bin used for recycling lay on its side, melted and ripped apart. One front window was smashed, the other boarded up with plywood. The stench of urine in the entry hall was so strong both the leasing agent and I gagged and covered our mouths until we grew accustomed to it. The overhead light had been broken and was hanging from the socket by its connecting wires. There were broken steps in the staircase leading to the next level, and the banister had been snapped off the wall. There were holes in the downstairs wall that were presumably made by fists, and darkish streaks of something I could not readily identify. The torn notices referring to a previous tenant's arrest for violent assault and informing the residents that excessive partying, fights, weapons and drugs would result in immediate arrest and full prosecution provided a queasy suggestion as to the identity of the streaks. The room itself was not bad, larger than most I had previously viewed. It was dark because the electricity supply had been suspended, and thick with dust. It was spacious enough to accommodate not only a bed and dresser, but a table and chair, a rarity. There was a door leading to the backyard that looked newly installed, but the backyard itself looked as apocalyptically appealing as the front. I genuinely questioned how long I would survive living there. My phone rang. It was my caseworker. She asked what I thought. I couldn't think of a single word in response.
Well?
She asked. I started to describe the surroundings, but she cut me off, told me it didn't matter. I had made a promise. She disconnected. I signed the agreement. I was quiet for the next 2 days, lost in the fog of depression, keeping to myself as much as possible. When friends asked if I was all right, I told them I was fine, just tired. When I woke up the third morning, I had no specific thought to end my life, but proceeded to take the required steps like an automaton programmed for death. I purchased a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey and 4 Stella Artois beers from the local Sainsbury's. I went to 3 separate pharmacists and purchased a wide selection of over-the-counter medications for whatever cocktail I would ultimately blend. I had no plans to leave a note or give any indication of my purpose. I simply intended to quietly slip away. I knew exactly where I would spend my final moments, and where I would be found. One of my first accomplishments after arriving in London was to locate Sir John Kirk's grave. His celebrity at the time of his death in 1922 was so great its location was never revealed to prevent the hordes of expected mourners from wreaking unintentional mayhem at the site. I had reasoned it would likely be within walking distance of his final residence for his widow, well into her 70s, to visit. That address was a small house called Tanglewood in Dorking. I had located the house, spotted a nearby church steeple, and sure enough, there he lay. As Sir John had been the reason for my coming to England, it seemed appropriate to complete my departure at his gravesite. Leaving unnoticed proved impossible, and I found myself joining a group of friends passing the day in front of Westminster Cathedral. I put on a little theatrical performance of my own, engaging in the jokey banter seemingly without a care in the world. I smiled. I laughed. I was the living embodiment of normal. Nothing to see here. Everything is normal. Too normal. And my laughter was not. I have a distinctive love it or hate it laugh that cannot be faked no matter how hard I try, particularly when someone knows me. My partner in crime loved it, saying it reminded him of the killer doll from the Child's Play movies. He dubbed me Chucky on our first meeting, and that was forever the name I was known by within the homeless communities of Charing Cross and Westminster, strangely adding to my street credibility. Better to share a name with a homicidal doll than a pedophile. He picked up on the lie in my laugh, saw through my act, and when I said my normal see you later goodbyes, quietly followed me. As lovely as it would be to share an intense Shakespearean account of two middle-aged men pondering the uncertainties of life and death in an English village graveyard, spouting lyrical soliloquies with skulls raised to the heavens in the palms of our hands, the reality was emphatically mundane. Real life generally is, no matter how dramatic the circumstances. My journey to the afterlife was set to begin on a double-decker bus, the first of 3 to take me to Dorking. Realizing he could no longer follow me without revealing himself, he sauntered up out of the blue and asked,
"What's up, Chuck?"
"Nothing. Fuck off."
Uh-huh.
He reached for the rucksack at my feet, opened it, and pulled out the 4 cans of beer.
Uh-huh.
He repeated. He cracked one open, handed it to me, cracked open a second, and began drinking it himself.
"What you up to?"
"Nothing. Fuck off."
Uh-huh.
Hardly the to-be or not-to-be melodrama of Hamlet. My life was saved drinking beer on the red plastic bench at a transit shelter for the 148 bus to Shepherd's Green, my personal gateway to eternity. Sorry, Shakespeare. We spent the rest of the day talking, eventually making our way to St. James Park, stopping only to pick up more beer and a couple of loaves of bread to feed the ducks. He did most of the talking. I had shifted from suicide to sulk mode and was happy to stay there. He shared details from his past, including his own suicide attempt a few years previously. He admitted my situation looked dark but had faced darkness himself and learned to stare it down. He said no matter how bad things get, no matter how much people fuck you over, never give them the satisfaction of killing yourself. Go down fighting and make them take you down. And give them the fucking finger when they do it. He also shared the coping mechanisms he had learned in prison. Anger management techniques and methods to fight depression. He recommended I join his gym not only to put on some sorely needed weight, but to release the negative energy as loud and as violent as I wanted. And he told me never to lose my laugh. It was my best weapon. It made others laugh. It helped others. It helped him. Let them take my life, but never let them take my laugh. We drank some more, and while feeding the ducks he asked where I was going when he caught up with me. When I told him, he stared at me with complete bewilderment and exclaimed,
"Dorking? Jesus, Chuck. I can think of better places to kill myself. The fuck is wrong with you?"
I had to laugh. We made our way to Trafalgar Square and spent the evening perched on the National Gallery wall heckling the buskers with other homeless friends. That day was my lowest moment, but one of his finest hours. He had not only pulled me from the brink of suicide, he had planted the seeds I needed to survive. An education far more valuable than any taught in school. They had little immediate effect but stayed rooted in the back of my mind and slowly spread. Lessons I later discovered were not only important for survival, but in the healing that comes after the battle has been won or lost. Street wisdom I will continue to live by until that fateful day, long in the future, when I finally shuffle off this mortal coil. I couldn't have asked for a better friend. Had he not eventually been convinced by other friends on the street to stop taking the medication he needed so he could drink and smoke weed with them, had he not been so mistreated by the charities he had turned to for help after his release from prison and his legitimate desire to reform, later events may not have transpired as they did. His story is far more tragic than mine. But it is not my story to tell. I'm a human being, not a fundraiser or social justice warrior seeking to exploit the stories of others to further a great and glorious cause. His story is his and is alone to tell, wherever the streets have taken him. Stories like his need to be heard.